Hello, guys, and welcome to another one. This one is going to be part two of my Tower Tips series, and I am just going to head straight in and talk about gear. I don't actually need to be inside the tower, but I will be just so that you guys see how I gear and how monsters hit me through this gear. So, first thing is first, you're going to want as much defense and resistance as you can possibly get without compromising your damage too much. And what I mean by that is you don't want something that's taking away all of your offensive powers for defensive powers. You want a good balance so that you don't take forever to kill the stuff, but they also can't kill you while you're in there. So this has been the main setup I've been using, and this is my level 231 account. So the stats are 5,700 defense, 6,000 resistance, 4,000 magic, very low dexterity unfortunately, but we just try to stun what we can't hit just in case. Only 5% crit chance. I'm actually going to increase that because I find as Heretic using crits is very helpful for my types of builds, but it's all dependent on what you're trying to do. So if you're using Realm Shifter and you're trying to use something like Warrior's Pavane as Charmer, or you're using Swordplay, then you don't need crit in your build. So stuff like that, it's just dependent on what you're trying to do. So as I said, I'm using 5,700 defense, 6,000 resistance, and I'm also using the Ashen Phoenix pet, which for some strange reason I don't have in here right now. But I'm using that pet because I need the extra defenses and even offensive power of the Deific Channel spell that the Phoenix will cast on you ever so often. So, gotta get just a little bit of view distance so I can pull it out. Oops, I don't have Searcher Swords on here. I should get them. So, some really great items that I would recommend, and I'm going to recommend some stuff that people were not expecting at all. So, Third Horseman boots. All classes can use it. It's really good. Final Horseman boots, even better. And what is good about these items is one, they have a bit of foresight, which I like because foresight is a thing in the towers. Monsters can attack before you, as well as they have a ton of defense and a ton of resistance. Now I'll show you my gear and explain something about the gear itself, because I'm also going to show you my ward. So someone was asking, is it better to use an Arisen shield with more ward or use a shield that has defense, resistance, and a bit of ward? And my answer to that is the balance must be complete. So if you have a ton, if you're using Arisen Fey gear, then maybe you could use an Arisen shield. But if you're using a bit of balance between defense and ward already, then you need to balance it out completely. So the example that I gave was it is better to have like 6,000 resistance, 6,000 defense, and 50k ward than 2,000 resistance, 2,000 defense, and 100k ward. Because if you're taking half of the damage in your ward versus you taking like a quarter or like a tenth of the damage, especially when DC goes up, then it's a big difference. So that's my main point about just keeping yourself tanky. That's the word I use. I realize that it's not as popular in this community, but it's actually a very popular word, and it means that you have good defense, good resistance, and you can take hits without worrying about dying. So I use the Arisen Arch gadget because I am very weak on this account, so I need to use Mimic's Mischief. But using Mimic's Mischief can be very risky if it gives you the double defense downs, because it only takes a good turn from the enemies to completely wipe you out. Now, in my previous video, I spoke about gear you could hunt in tier 9. I mentioned the 3rd Horseman boots. So I'm going to mention other tier 9 items, which, yes, they are rare, but even at base quality, you can upgrade something like the Fey Yeti horns as well as the Fey Yeti coat. Now, these are not base quality ones. I think these are both ornates. I can't remember completely though, but if this isn't ornate, this is like a high legendary, and I do think this is ornate. Now, one of the amethysts I like to use, I don't have that many good amethysts, so the amethyst I use is Arcane Resistance, and that is because the Arcane Trolls do a lot of damage, as well as when I'm fighting the deity, it can use Ultima 2, I believe. So I use the Resistance amethyst to make it so that neither of those things can kill me. I use this staff because it's actually my best staff, and it gives me a bunch of random stat ups or just random resistances to elements and stuff like that. Now, technically, I have unstable omnimancy as a heretic, but other classes might find some use in the water resistance and all of those other things that it has. I also like it for the Berserk 1, which is an addition to your tankiness, but it procs so low, the proc rate is so low that I wouldn't depend on it. I just use Berserk mushrooms regardless. Now, I use a Concord in here with my Arisen Jolly Stockings whenever I'm fighting the Guardians, like the what are they called now? Tower Guardians, is it? The ones that drop the keys, because I want the keys. But if I'm not fighting those things, I sometimes put on something else to give me a bit more stats or some tankiness, or sometimes I even wear Naganin's belt to give me the additional status protection, plus making it easier for me to apply my statuses. And why I want to apply statuses is because I have some spores in my weapon. So in order to keep the Ashen Phoenix's DC up, I need a bit of action rate. So you'll realize I have 5 in there to give me about 10%. Or is that 6? I think that's actually 6. So I have 12%. Plus I use the small bestial potion, which I'll need to hunt more of. And that is how I am able to keep DC up. And with the remaining slots, I do use spores, which have the effect of giving sleep, blight, and something else. And those are very useful when they do proc, granted without assassin. And even with assassin, they don't proc every single time, but they do proc. And sometimes you're fighting something challenging and you hit it and you realize it fell asleep. No, I'm not saying it's game changing. I'm just saying that it comes in clutch sometimes. So it's up to you if you want to do something like that. For my Jolly Stockings, the reason I'm wearing these is because it has a good balance of defense and res, as well as a bunch of adornment slots, which you see that I've put in golden pinions to give me more defense. Because remember, if I don't have the defense, some things will just cut through my ward no matter how much ward I am having. So a good example of that would be the Beowulf floors with the cactuses. The cactuses are stuff that have a low M1 value, but if they can penetrate your defense, they're most likely going to do a bunch of damage. So on a floor like that, I'll pop my golem's fortitude and I will usually be safe, especially if DC is up. If DC is up, I don't have to worry about anything, but if it is not, golem's fortitude is also a good bet with this gear. And that's because, as I said, I have over 5,500 defense. So when DC is popped on that, it is doubled, and then I can tank a lot easier. Need to Godforge this, obviously. A better option than this would be the Arisen Wolven Tower Shield from the Arisen Kerberos World Raid boss. It is available right now, so you guys should definitely be trying to hunt that down, farming it. Another good helmet would be the Old Northern Crown. Even a base one with enough golden pinions can do something. Like, it can be very tanky if you don't have a better Fey Yeti horn. So it's all dependent on what gear you have. Arisen Surtur's chest or Arisen Hell's garb, also really good, also a great balance in defense and resistance, as well as some dexterity and a bit of ward. The Hells has protection from stunned and blind, I believe, which you can be stunned and blinded in here. So it's not something you should scoff at. Like, the gear options, well, Arisen Surtur you can use as a heretic. Arisen Hell, you would be using that as a realm or a deity or a Beo, just other classes other than heretic. The boots, I love the boots too. If I had those boots, I would gladly replace these boots because it's basically the same stats, except those give dexterity too. And as you know, higher your dexterity, the more likely you are to hit. So, and hitting the enemy obviously is one, a key factor in killing them, and two, even just applying status effects. Now, as you get tankier, you have a lot more options. You can kind of forego some of the defense because you have your base defense, especially if you have a bunch of ascension levels. So at that point, you can start to mix and match, trying to go a little bit faster with stuff like an Amadan staff, which if you're on assassin and you have a bunch of like spores or other status inflicting adornments in, plus your Amadan staff, when you use your skill, the AoE, it has the potential to throw on a bunch of status effects on all the enemies. So if you don't have something like Ashen Phoenix and you're finding it hard to stay alive, this could be a strategy that you go high foresight and try to impede their movement so they can't do anything, and therefore makes it so that you are able to kill them while they can't move. Adornments, honestly, I would say some really good ones are the ones that freeze and the ones that paralyze. So those are the blue and yellow eyes of Kerberos. And those also give a little bit of stats. I think HP, mana, 1% crit, stuff like that. So they aren't the worst, and they actually have a good chance of freezing or paralyzing. If you're finding some monsters tough to deal with, then the green eyes, which give rot, also give you a chance to hit some, as rot degrades their defenses. So it's all about the problems you're having in the tower and solving those problems. So obviously none of this gear is gear I would be wearing if I had like best in slot gear. Maybe I would still use the Feyeti coat for some things, but unlikely if I had the Arisen Fae Banshee's robe, I wouldn't use the Feyeti coat just because that is just so much tankier. It also helps me by taking some of my mana. So when I have like 4,000 mana, it's easier to get to 2,000 mana and comfortably in my Iconoclast passive than when I have 6,000 mana with something like this. Then it's a bit harder to utilize my passive properly. So this is just going through the tower. Whenever I'm fighting the tower guardians, I am on sequencer even as my baby account, and I just use the typical sequencer build, and I exploit their weakness to do more damage. I'm trying to think of what else I could add to this video. I think one of the other things I should talk about, wow, 700 people died on the first floor, that's crazy, would be like this. Okay, perfect. So as an early game person, guys, like, why are you going to try to do this floor? Why are you going to try to do this floor? That's what you have to ask yourself. What is the benefit of doing this one in particular? Because you look at the monsters inside there, and I think actually I need a completely different video for the monsters and monster analysis and what floors to avoid. So I'm going to end this video here with the gear, because I don't want to go through every single gear, but you guys have an idea of what I'm talking about when I say you need a good balance. So you'll notice I have 51,000 ward and 5,700 defense, 6,000 resistance. So that is a good base that you can say, okay, yeah, I can work towards gaining those stats and I will be able to do the towers completely comfortably, like with ease. So yeah, aim to gain these stats, and remember that this is just a level 231 baby account. Yes, it does have some decent gear, but that is the point of these games. You're grinding your gear. You're grinding for good gear, and without good gear, then anything is going to be difficult. I'm sure even dungeons might be difficult. So you just need to grind and get some nicer gear. If you don't have it, if you have gear that you can mix and match, do not be afraid to mix and match. The stats are what you're going for, not pretty gear, not fancy named gear. Fuck that. You're going for gear that makes it so that you can survive and so that you can smack stuff. So, yeah. Thank you guys for watching as usual. If you have any additional questions about anything, you can leave it in the comment section below. If you're hunting for gear and finding it hard, I'm going to give away some summoning scrolls in this video, just because I know that a lot of persons watching this are earlier game and you might not have access to the most stuff. So maybe you can get lucky with some summoning scrolls, and it's not going to be the most in the world, but the first 5 persons who comments and tells me the tower they're trying to grind and what item they're trying to grind will get 10 summoning scrolls each. So yeah. And finally, if you enjoyed this, if it was informative, if it helped you at all, do leave a like, do subscribe for more, do leave a comment. Even if you don't win summoning scrolls, who knows, I might pick an extra person or two to gift some summoning scrolls. If you did comment and you win your summoning scrolls, remember to come over to my Discord and message me to get them paid. Finally, and probably, what would I say now, most fittingly, because you gotta save the best for last, I would like to thank my patrons. You got Deluxe, you got Urban and Bear, you got Night Sky, you got Eren, you got Makana, you got Daishi, and you got Technique. Thank you guys for your continued support. I'm going to dedicate this week to helping you guys because I have a double underworld portal. So I'm going to get you guys a bunch of scrolls this week. We're going to be farming as fuck. So yeah, thank you guys for watching as usual. And yeah, see ya.